why don't why
Go ahead,
don't
Bob.
market professionals believe Trump when he says something? And I know that's a crazy statement because he says so many different things, but economically, he was very consistent. We're going to do tariffs. We're going to do tariffs. We're going to do tariffs. He does tariffs. The world freaks out. We're
Well,
going to
I
do
think,
this. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. He does it. The world freaks out. So
well, he changes his his policies, perhaps, in this term differently than in his first term, right? Yes, he did very much forecast that he was going to. I think that the numbers he put out there was his way of negotiating, right? He threw out giant numbers, and then he compromises, and actually has been pretty effective at getting, for example, Europe to agree to a pretty favorable deal to the U.S. So his approach to it is fairly unorthodox. And but if you followed his career, it's not so different from what he's done, prior to being president. But markets are not used to this, right? I think that's part of the situation. If you look at the Biden administration, is nothing like this at all. And the Obama administration, nothing like this at all. And Trump 1.0, not really anything like this at all. At least as regards, the sort of trade wars, if you want to call it that. So it makes for a pretty interesting environment and tricky.
And tricky for Jerome Powell, you would think. I mean, listen, it's fashionable to beat up on Powell, but if I'm sitting there, if I'm him, I'm saying, well, are the tariffs inflationary, or are we getting a recession because of them? I mean, isn't that kind of what he's dealing with right now?
Absolutely, and in fact, you're beginning to see divergence within the Fed. We learned that, right? That a couple of members of the Fed feel like the tariffs are going to slow growth in the U.S. and we need to consider cutting rates sooner than later. And there are other members of the Fed that say, wait a minute, these tariffs are inflationary. We don't have the luxury to start cutting yet. So you're getting it's a very, as I said, unique environment and very interesting environment, and one which I think is probably going to stay pretty fairly a lot of changes. I mean, just think about how many changes have been to rate expectations this year. We started the year before the trade announcement, the tariff announcements, expecting 4 cuts this year. Now maybe we'll get 1. So not only is our policies changing a lot and expectations changing a lot, but it's in a backdrop where Europe is coming through with the cuts that the market expected, and the U.S. is disappointing.
Do you think any of this stuff involving Fed independence is starting to? It seems like it happens. Markets trade off a little bit. Trump comes back and says, I like him, but I don't like him. And then it kind of just goes back to like his Twitter feed or Truth Social feed. Is this but is this like behind the scenes causing any sort of indigestion out there?
Well, I think when we hear the pressure on the Fed and the potential of compromising the independence of the Fed, which I personally don't believe is a good thing as a general statement, it upsets the market, and people don't, usually get nervous, and then you see a little bit of a tiny correction in prices. But I think this is all going to go away. I think Powell is naturally going to, term out, and I'm sure Trump will put somebody in who's both capable and also, is on the accommodative side of the ledger, if he can find the right person, and I'm sure he will do so.
So Ken, do you think that dollar dominance is the talk of the let's call it the diminishment of the dollar is overdone?
I think a little bit. It sold off 3 or 4% since the tariff deal with Europe was announced, right? So I think we'll probably go into a trading range now, which we can see for long periods of time. I think there are arguments, for the dollar, there are arguments against the dollar. I personally feel that the U.S., notwithstanding some of the problems we have, is still, the most powerful nation in the world.
That's what I think. Every time I hear the kind of subtract of, well, there's going to be other currencies, there's baskets of currencies, they'll take the place of the dollar. Every time the 10-year gets to 5%, there's a huge bid. There's a lot of liquidity. People still love the dollar. They still love the safety. I kind of think it's overdone, but that's my view. That's why I wanted to ask someone that really does it for a living and say,
Yeah, if you think about it, the dollar was around 105 or something like that, 106, 107 against the euro. It got as high as around 118. Now it's around 114. Fair value probably 110, 112, 114. I mean, I think we've kind of starting to get to an equilibrium where it makes sense for both sides of the argument.
Why would someone look elsewhere? I do hear the sort of argument out there. It's often on like MSNBC. Well, Trump is destroying relationships and doing this, doing that, and who wants to trade with us? I mean, putting your money elsewhere is as big of a risk as, is China a great place to keep your money? I mean, is crypto phenomenal instead of the dollar? I mean, aren't we like the tallest midget in the room, no matter which way you got it?
That's one way to put it. Look, I think it makes sense for investors to have some of their portfolio not just invested in the United States and not just in traditional investments. And crypto has proven to be pretty evergreen and has
So far.
continued to perform. Gold has performed reasonably well. There have been some alternative assets that people are pretty skeptical about and have been a okay kind of investment. And some of the emerging markets have done really well recently, and credit spreads on emerging market bonds, for example, are really tight. So I happen to agree with you, Charlie. I'd rather invest in the United States with the regulatory infrastructure we have, with the resources that we have, with the transparency that we have any day.